Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing the GTX 1650 as you can see here in MSI Afterburner. This is actually the Gigabyte ITX version of the card. It doesn't require any external power connectors, so it's pretty good for those of you that are looking for a low power card because you have something like a low-end power supply or something like that. And yeah, we're running a Ryzen 7 3700X with 16 gigs of RAM. Of course, overkill specs for the GTX 1650, but you guys should be expecting the same results as we're about to see in this one with something like a Ryzen 5 2600 overclock. Now, we're going to be playing in this one at 1080p, of course, a very adequate resolution for the GTX 1650, very low settings, competitive settings, which is very low settings with ultra view distance over here, and medium textures. The textures don't really impact your FPS, it's just to make the game look a little bit prettier, you know. And of course, we're also going to be testing low, medium, high, and ultra settings, the presets over here. So let's get into it. And we are dropping here, as you can see guys, in our favorite city of Pochinki. Pochinki is an amazing little city out in the Erangel map, in the Erangel country, kind of, maybe. Can this be called a country or something? Not really sure. Oh my god, there's one approaching our little house, guys. What should I do now? He's already there. Oh boy, I think we're just gonna die. You know, we're probably just gonna die, guys. I'm gonna try still to get a weapon over here. Alright, we got an auto shotgun. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh, I think he's here. Alright, wait a second, guys. Oh my god, what the heck? Okay, where are you, buddy? Oh boy, oh boy. Come on, he's almost dead. Okay, got him, guys. Got a little stutter as well there. But of course, guys, stuttering is a normal thing here in PUBG. It's kind of a feature, you know, so you shouldn't be really concerned about that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and go to our little spot over here to start our testing, because I do have these average and 1% low thingies going on right now. So as you can see here, very low settings, as I'm about to show you again. 1080p, of course, nothing is changed over here. And let's go, guys. 1% lows, that's because of the menu probably. I'm just gonna do that again, guys. Alright, let's go, guys. Counting again. Let's see our FPS over here in Pochinki, which is kind of one of the most demanding areas when you are actually looking at the entire city from the church up there. There's one guy over there. That's why my voice was a little bit messed up there, because I was scared, you know. Well, I'm not really scared, but you know, I just don't really want to die right now. I just want to finish the benchmarking peacefully, you know, and maybe at the end try to win the game. But yeah, that's probably not gonna happen, to be honest. But you know what, guys, I'm not really sure how many FPS we got with the RX 570. I don't remember, but you guys can check that out in the other video that I made like yesterday, I think. So what I can tell you is that the gameplay so far has been very smooth here with the GTX 1650. As you can see, the 1% lows are in the 90s. I think the RX 570 got 1% lows in the 90s as well. Looking at the entire city, we see 105 FPS. Of course. Okay, this guy just had to be there. Of course, oh my god damn it, are you kidding me? Alright guys, we're here getting pretty much the same FPS as we were getting before. 107, 108 right now, 109. We were previously getting like 105 because there were a few more people here in Pochinki, of course, and that drops our frame rate a little bit more, but you know, it's pretty much the same thing, kind of in the ballpark, you know. So yeah, this is also the same FPS as we've seen with the RX 570, like around 105 to 110 FPS looking at the entire city. So this is pretty decent to see coming out from the GTX 1650, because in some games the RX 570 is actually up to 20% faster than this card. So these games with the Unreal Engine, so that's PUBG, Fortnite and stuff like that, run better on Nvidia cards. So yeah, keep that in mind if you are looking to buy, for example, a GTX 1060. Oh, there's a stutter there, as you can see. So yeah, that's normal in this game as well. But yeah, if you are looking to buy a GTX 1060 or an RX 580, like the 6GB model of the the 1060 and 8 GB model of the 580. I really recommend you to buy the 580 instead of the 1060, to be honest, because in newer games the 580 is actually much faster. For example, in Call of Duty Modern Warfare we tested the 570 and the 1650, of course, and the 570 was a lot faster. It was actually comparable to the GTX 1066 Gigabyte. So guys, let's go ahead here and test competitive settings. As you can see, the view distance is set to ultra right now, medium textures, and of course textures are applied, as you can see here. So let's start our countdown. We've seen that in the lowest settings, very low settings, we saw an average of 126 and a 1% low of 97. So let's start our counting here on competitive settings. If you want to play on these settings, of course, if you are a little bit more competitive, you know, and if you have a 144 Hz monitor, I think you should be able to get like 100 plus FPS average for sure here using these settings. But of course, if you really want to get that maximum performance out of this card, you want to play on very low settings. That got us an average pretty close to like 144, which is the refresh rate of most high refresh rate monitors out there, at least 1080p ones. And as you can see, guys, we're getting 1% lows, a little bit lower than before at very low settings. That's normal, you know, that's completely fine. Still, it's still above 80 FPS, 1% low, so it's still a very smooth experience. Of course, I'm just gonna pick this up here, and as you can see, looking at the entire city right now, we're getting pretty much the same performance as we got with the RX 570. Again, like just under 100 FPS. Average is still way above 100 FPS, 1% lows at 89 right now, so that's really good to see. That indicates that there isn't really much stuttering to speak of. So yeah, I'm not really sure if we got less stuttering with the RX 570 or a little bit more, but the game seems to be random in that department, you know. I even got stutter with the GTX 1080 sometimes and 1660 Ti, if you want to check out that video as well. And yeah, it's just how the game runs. You just gotta get used to it. It's always been like this. Yeah, that's competitive settings over here. As you can see, 120 FPS, around 115 to 120 FPS average. Looking at the entire city, we got down in the 90s. That's still pretty good performance, you know. If you have a high refresh rate monitor, you will still benefit from those high refresh rates, of course, because you're still above 100 FPS pretty much 99% of the time, or like 97% of the time. So this is pretty good coming from the GTX 1650. If you are one of those guys with like a 300 watt power supply and don't really want to upgrade that, well, I can tell you that this GPU will definitely be a good choice for you. Just keep in mind that it's usually overpriced compared to the AMD counterparts, and you could get like an RX 580 for the price of this thing. At least here in Portugal, the 580s are around the same price as the GTX 1650, and the 570s are obviously much cheaper. So I'd grab an RX 570 for that price performance, or even like an RX 580 if you want a really big performance boost coming from a GTX 1650. So I just don't really recommend this card, and again, I would only recommend it for those of you that have low-end power supplies, you know, and can't really afford to have an RX 570 pushing 120 watts of power in your system. So yeah, guys, as you can see here, so far so good. Average around 100 FPS here on low settings. Looking at the entire city, we're getting down to the high 80s. That's still very good, you know. Of course, if you do have a high refresh rate monitor, I would prefer to play at very low settings or competitive settings, probably very low settings actually, with like medium textures, which don't really affect your frame rate again. And yeah, that would be my ideal experience for this game with the 1650. But if you want a little bit higher visual fidelity, just play on low settings, because the game still looks good. I don't think the anti-aliasing is very good here in this one, because it makes things a little bit too blurry, and the jaggies are still there, so it's really weird, this kind of implementation of anti-aliasing on low settings. There is a difference between very low settings anti-aliasing and low settings anti-aliasing, but I don't feel like putting it on low is worth it. Either put it on medium, high, or ultra, or just turn it off completely, which is the very low setting. As you can see, guys, so far so good. 98 FPS average. It's the red zone going on right here, so I'm probably gonna die if I stay here, so we're just gonna go inside. 75 FPS, 1% lows. This is pretty decent for the GTX 1650. I think the RX 570 did a little bit better, but I'm not too sure. I don't remember properly. The thing is that in Fortnite and PUBG, the RX 570 is actually very close in performance to the GTX 1650. So yeah, either of those will be fine in this game, but of course I'd recommend the AMD counterpart because of the gains that you get in newer titles, as I mentioned already. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 is another example of that. If you watch my 1650 video and compare it to my RX 570 video, you'll see that the RX 570 is again getting pretty much the same FPS as the GTX 1066 Gigabyte. So yeah, the 1066 Gigabyte is definitely more powerful than the GTX 1650 here. Just keep that in mind. If you want to play newer games, buy an AMD GPU at this price range. Of course, if you go in the upper end GPUs like RTX 2070 Super, those are actually kind of worth it. And if you want the best of the best, of course 2080 Ti is the way to go. I don't think the RTX 2070 is worth it over the Super. The Super, you actually get a pretty decent performance boost over the 5700 XT. So if you want to pay the premium for that, you can definitely do so, you know, and it's still not a bad value graphics card. But also remember that there's the 5700 from AMD and 5700 XTs, and I would pick a 5700 instead, for example, of a 2060 or 2060 Super. The 5700 non-XT is actually faster than both of those, and the 5700 XT is actually like, what, 5 to 10% slower than the RTX 2070 Super. So yeah, that's a pretty good value as well, because at least here in Portugal it still goes for like $100 less than the 2070 Super. So of course, value wise, the 2070 Super is not as good as the RX 5700 XT, but still, if you want to pay the premium and to have those RTX features, if that interests you, well, you can definitely do so, and the 2070 Super is not a bad price performance card. And as you can see, the 1650 on medium settings got us an 85 FPS average and 65 FPS 1% low, so still a very smooth experience, obviously. And let's go ahead and put it on high settings now. Let's start our counting system over here. The RX 570 actually got 1% lows on high settings above 60 FPS, I think, if I remember correctly. And by the way, guys, I don't have anything against Nvidia or against AMD. I'm just telling you what I think based on pricing and stuff like that. Of course, if the 1650 was better priced, I would be recommending this card because the power consumption is really impressive on this one. God damn it. Why? Oh my god, guys, so we're dropping here at high settings again, of course, and as you can see, there's a ton of people dropping in Pachinki with us again. I just hope I don't die right away and we're able to finish our benchmark run over here. Okay, so I'm just gonna pick up a few things. Okay, so we got a shotgun, so if we get into a long range fight, I think we're just dead, guys. And a pistol here, I don't really care about that. Let's go. And so far what I'm seeing is if you have something like a 75 Hz monitor, play at medium or high settings. I think the visual fidelity increase coming from medium to high settings is actually worth it in this one, as long as you keep above 60 FPS, of course. That's very important in games like these. And alright, guys, as you can see, looking at the entire city, we're only getting down to like 65, 67 FPS. That's pretty damn good, to be honest here. So if you have a 75 Hz monitor or a 60 Hz monitor and want to play this game, I say that high settings are pretty damn good here for the GTX 1650. Not bad at all, not a bad experience. The game feels smooth at these FPS. Of course, there's the occasional stutter here and there. That's why our 1% lows are a little bit below 60 FPS. Aside from those occasional stutters, the gameplay is very smooth here on high settings, and it's kind of a very similar experience to what we got with the RX 570, to be honest. So let's go ahead now and test our last settings of the day. As you could see there, our averages are 72, our 1% lows are 58. Not bad performance. It's still above 60 FPS pretty much at all times, like 99% of the time, and only 1% of the time it will be at 58 FPS. That's what those metrics mean over there. So let's just wait for the red zone to pass. Alright, let's start this. As you can see, we drop below 60 FPS here on ultra settings, so I don't really recommend you to play like this. I think we're actually getting a few more FPS than the RX 570 on ultra settings, which is weird, or maybe it's kind of the same. I think we were in the mid 40s as well with that GPU, but of course it's impressive coming out from the GTX 1650 to get the same FPS as the RX 570, because after all, as I was saying earlier, like 5 minutes ago or something like that, this is a 75 watts card and the RX 570 consumes 120 watts of power, so it's quite impressive what this little card can do at these TDP values. It is a really good option for those of you with lower end power supplies, as I've said like a million times already, but I cannot emphasize that enough. You know, it's really good performance for the watt, you know, but it's not really good performance for the price. That's where Nvidia just missed the mark a little bit. So you can see here 45 FPS looking at the entire city of Pochinki. Not a bad result whatsoever. If you want to play on ultra settings for some reason, you can still play like this. It's playable, but I don't really recommend it because of course the visual fidelity increase coming from high settings to ultra settings isn't really that noticeable, to be honest. Maybe the anti-aliasing looks a little bit better and the shadows and ambient occlusion are a little bit boosted, but you know, I will just play on high settings if you want the best visuals for the performance trade-off, kind of. I think it's worth it to play on high settings with this card. You still get 60 plus FPS pretty much at all times, and of course the game looks good, okay? For PUBG terms, the game looks great. 45 FPS average, 37 FPS, 1% lows on ultra settings. So yeah, if you guys have a 60Hz monitor, play on high settings. If you have a 75Hz monitor, either play on medium or high. And if you have like a 100Hz, 120Hz or 144Hz monitor, just go ahead and play on very low or competitive settings, whatever you want. I don't really recommend low settings. The low settings preset just looks a little bit too bad to me, to be honest. Or at least if you want to play like that, just disable the anti-aliasing to make it look a little bit crispier. But yeah, that's just what I think. I think medium settings looks way better than low, and if you want that high refresh rate, just play on very low. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to give it a like if you did enjoy it. And of course, I am just gonna die now. Oh boy, can we get this guy? Oh my god. Oh, it's hard to control this, okay? I only have 4 bullets left. Okay, I don't have any bullets left. I have a shotgun though. All right, so we're gonna push him because why not? We just have nothing to lose anymore. The benchmark is done. Oh, we got him. Oh my god, I wasn't really expecting him to be here. So again, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Love you all. Bye bye.